Hey everyone, this is Cynics, and today I'm going to be talking about drawing faces. So the first video I ever did on this YouTube channel was actually about drawing faces, and I think that was about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's pretty outdated, and the audio and video quality, and even especially the art quality is pretty terrible by my standards today, so I thought it would be a good time to actually go back and redo that video. So I'm going to start it the same way I started the last one, and that is with drawing a skull. And I'm going to do it from the side view because I feel like that helps to kind of get rid of some of the most common mistakes you see people make when they're drawing faces and stuff. So you can see I made my skull shape, started with the top, just kind of getting the general atmosphere going with that big swooping line. And I think you'll notice that the skull is very oblong. It's kind of flat on top. So you don't want to make the mistake of just drawing a circle. You always want to be drawing in ovals and more organic shapes. Because a circle is a bit unorganic. It doesn't have that same organic feel like a oval does, and things like that, where you get kind of mixtures of things, and things aren't just perfectly spherical or perfectly oval. Even they kind of have weird little nooks and crannies and stuff like that. So you can see the eye socket, it's very closed off to us on this side view. So obviously the eye is not going to be jolting out in front of us. It's going to be very closed off toward us. So those are kind of all important things to note. And I think doing references of skulls is probably the best way you can improve your facial drawing skills, especially from the mind, which is mainly what I'm talking about. It's being able to draw a face from the mind and construct it and have it look at least passable, somewhat realistic. And that's the main thing I'm trying to teach with this video. So you can see here I'm spending a lot of time on the jaw because I think the jaw is pretty important. It also is one of those things that is commonly messed up or deformed in some way, especially if you come from a background of drawing anime. And even I come from a background of drawing some anime and stuff like that. So the jaws in anime are obviously very pointy and they come down very sharply, and they just don't have that nice organic squareness to them. So you can see I drew some guidelines here, and the main guideline is on the front of the face, where I just wanted to show off how flat the front of the face is. So even the forehead and just the nose area and everything down through the jaw, it's all pretty flat. Obviously there's some, movement inward and outward, and the bottom jaw might be, more inward, but it can also be more outward. But basically you want it to be flat. For the most part, you don't want anything crazily in the back or in the front of the line, and stuff like that. So the main bones I'm focusing on here when I'm drawing the skull is definitely the cheekbone. You can see it under the eye there, but that's a very important bone for drawing your skull. And you can see back in the middle area where the cheekbone kind of flows off to. I didn't spend too much time there because it's not important for our anatomy purposes. It might be important if you're, want to render skulls, but we just want to render faces. And the purpose of drawing skulls for us is to get better at making faces. So you're not worrying about the bones and like the details that won't affect your facial features. So you can see here I switched to a frontal view because I thought it would be great to do both. And you can see I kind of built it the same way, focusing on the oval shape of the head and then putting in the eye sockets, which are kind of squarish. They're not just circles, you'll notice. They have rounded edges, but they kind of have these flat surfaces too, and they kind of slope downward and outward a bit. So it's kind of all this minor stuff that you'll really pick up on if you do some reference studies of skulls. And by the way, I recommend doing that as much as possible. I don't think anything has improved my facial drawing skills as much as doing references of skulls, even more so than doing references of actual faces, just because it really hammers home like the different kind of proportions that you want to aim for. So you just want to kind of take note of different things and kind of build formulas out of it. So you might notice the upper jaw bones kind of start out, or I should say the sides of the teeth, they're kind of even with the center of like the eye sockets. If you draw a line coming down from the center of each eye socket, you'll probably get something around the upper jaw. And you'll notice how kind of the lower jaw looks and how it's more inward than the cheekbones. It doesn't go out quite that far. And in fact, the cheekbones are probably kind of the farthest out, the most extreme area of the face. So you can kind of use those as a guide. But you can see here, I was actually kind of reworking my skull on the left. Not that it looked terrible or anything, but I just kind of wanted to line it up with the other one, just for the purposes of kind of making sure that they're both similar looking, and possibly they'll create a face that's similar looking. Because like you see in popular, I don't know, crime scene analysis shows, you can actually kind of construct a face based on the skull and based on the skeletal features. So that's kind of an interesting thing to do. Maybe you find a reference of a skull somewhere on the internet, and you just kind of go back and you try to build what the face might look like with that skull. That's just kind of an interesting thing you can try, just for fun. But anyway, you can see here I'm actually starting to go back over my skull and erase the skull and start filling in the fleshiness of the actual face. So using the skull stuff as a guide, you can see I drew in the nose first of all, because that's kind of a very noticeable change if you're going from a skull to a face, is the nose, because it's all fleshy and cartilage and everything like that. So it's drastically different from the outline of just the skull. As you can see, but I'm using everything as a guide. And you can use your own like anatomy a lot. Like I like to just kind of feel around on my face, feel where like the eye sockets are kind of moving and where the cheekbone is going toward. And especially like if you have your mouth closed, you might want to like put your finger to the middle of your lips and like see where it hits your teeth and stuff like that. Just anything you can do to help you learn all about anatomy and just kind of drill these things into your head. So you might notice, like I said, that that just having a neutral expression on your face, your opening of your mouth might actually hit somewhere around the middle of your upper teeth. So obviously it's not quite in the middle, like right in the middle of your upper and lower teeth, because you might think, oh, okay, let me think. If I have these lips in my mouth, it probably opens directly in between my two sets of teeth. But no, it's actually a little higher than that. So it's kind of these weird little things like that might help you out. So you can see I finished adding my fleshiness to the face on the right, and now I'm working on the face on the left. And you'll notice how creepy it kind of looks when you have like half fleshiness and half skullness. It's kind of very mummified look, or kind of decaying look, which is kind of awkward. Right now, it kind of reminds me of RoboCop for some reason. RoboCop without his helmet on. But now that it's getting filled out more, it looks less creepy and more natural and more human. So once again, just paying slight attention to the way things are formed. You want to focus on more organic shapes and not just draw straight lines everywhere. In kind of boring ways. You want to make everything slightly organic, which has, slight curves, those slight indentations and everything, and stuff like that. So let's see, anything else I want to mention? Some stuff about the hairline might be good. You'll notice on the side view how the hairline kind of starts in the middle of the forehead, a decent way up like you would imagine, but it goes back into the kind of the back of the head. It goes backward, just kind of follows the headline back, and then it comes forward again toward the temples, and then backward again. And these are just things you pick up by drawing a lot and by studying, what people look like and stuff like that. But the hairline is a pretty important thing to know. See there, you can see me flipping off and on the skulls, and you'll see how it kind of, it fits with everything, and you can see how the skulls and the facial features fit on top. And you'll notice the importance of those cheekbones, in that I use them to place kind of the lines of the cheeks and stuff like that. And there's a lot of things you can do playing with the cheekbones, in terms of adding your facial features and stuff like that. So I think that's it for those faces, and I'm just going to move right along and talk about some other views of the head and whatnot. So you'll see here that I'm doing a top-down view of the skull. And I think if you have a top-down view, a side view, and a front view, you have all the data you need to pretty much plug it into your brain and move a 3D object and know what it's going to look like from whatever view you might want to look at it from. So that's kind of important. If you have like all those key features down, top, side, and front, you should be able to kind of build it in your head, and if you think about it, you might be able to move it in a kind of mathematical way. So there's my top view. You can notice how I'm kind of pointing at how the ears work, how they're kind of pinned in the front, and then they kind of obviously fly off into the back, but pinning them down in the front is obviously where they come from. So it's important to get that look when you're doing a top-down view or another view where that might come in handy. So you can see here I'm kind of building out my face. I added the nose, and since this is a pretty close to near top-down, it's not quite fully top-down view, but you can see how like that affects things like the eyelids, how they're kind of following the curve of the eye, and you're just seeing like a bottom of a crescent shape instead of like a flat line or something like that. You're seeing that crescent shape. So once again, just building things in your mind and thinking about how they would work. So it comes in handy a lot with stuff like that, where you think about, okay, how would this look from the top? It's not just a flat line. There's curves to everything, so you want to make sure you're following those lines with your basic line work. And here you can see me adding in the basic hairline. Once again, I always think it's important to add that in, and I'm just going to add some shoulder kind of structure in just for fun, just to kind of show where they would be with this certain view. But anyway, moving right along, I'm going to do another view of the skull, or of the face I should say, and that's going to be from a bottom looking upward view. When I had art class in like 4th grade or something, grade school, we used to talk about the different perspectives, and it was like bird perspective and worm perspective and person perspective. So this is going to be worm perspective. We're seeing what a person looks like if you're a worm. So you can see here I'm using the cheekbones as my kind of outer areas of the face. They're the widest area, and I'm kind of using them as a guide, and I'm also using them to determine where my ears are going to be, because the ears are kind of pinned into the sides of the cheekbones where they go back into the skull. So you can use that as a guide, that widest area where the cheekbones are going back, as a directional place on where to put your ears. So you can see there the kind of bottom view is done, and I think there's some other stuff I want to mention about it. You can see how the top of the outline is kind of flat, where the forehead is, and you kind of want to take those things into account. The flatness of the forehead, you build that into your view, and stuff like that, and your eyes might feel closer together when you have this really extreme perspective. That's just because they're farther away, so things are closer together, and there's just kind of slight foreshortening things going on there. But you can see how I didn't define the jawline or anything like that, because once again, this has to do with the drawing like a painter stuff. But obviously, since there's not going to be a strong shadow, since you have your head tilted upward and it kind of flattens out the surface from your cheeks to your neck, and around your lower jaw and everything like that, it kind of flattens things out, and there's no shadows cast anymore. So you don't want to put any dark lines or like strong lines like I'm doing in this face on the right here, which is just a very neutral face, but you can see how it has these shadows under it and strong lines here and there. And that just goes into, once again, drawing like a painter, drawing in a more painterly way. where you're taking lighting into account, even when you're doing just simple anatomy sketches and stuff like that. So you can see I kind of filled in the skull afterward this time. I drew a face and then kind of filled in the skull very lightly just to kind of make sure everything lined up. So I think that's about it for drawing those boring faces in the most standard perspectives, those kind of top-down, top-down. I don't know what's the opposite of top-down. Top-down, I don't know what to call it, so I'll just keep calling it worm view. Top-down worm view and side view, frontal mugshot view, and all that stuff. So now I'm going to use what we've learned, and I'm going to just kind of go back in and start drawing faces from strange angles. The angles that might be more useful toward you, the angles that might be more useful in your art career. Just being able to draw the face from any random direction, because you don't want to always be looking straight at the face or straight down at the face or straight to the side. So obviously you need to do a lot of 3/4 stuff and random angles and stuff like that. So you can see I'm just kind of using what I learned over the past demonstrations to kind of fill in the face in all kinds of interesting ways. So that first one is kind of a slightly top-down but slightly angled view, slightly 3/4 as well. And you can see how the cheekbones, once again, are very important to everything I do with faces. You can see how they kind of define the side of the face there. With the big cheekbones sticking out, and then the nose also defining some stuff, and then the jawbone and stuff like that. But the way these angles are being formed should be very familiar to you if you were paying attention to the skulls and how, kind of the upper jaw fit into the cheekbones and the lower jaw was formed and everything like that. So these are just kind of exaggerations of all that stuff. And you can see these lines I'm placing on the face, like around the cheeks and everything. Those are all determined by the cheekbones. So a little slash here to show some gauntness in the face. It's all determined by those cheekbones, and those like kind of droopiness under the eyes. It's all determined by the eye socket. So it's kind of all these skull features that are kind of being factored in to these lines on the face. Because it might just look like I'm drawing these faces and I'm adding personality to them and I'm kind of making up this fleshiness, and it has very little to do with the skull, but in fact it has a whole lot to do with the skull and all that kind of stuff that I talked about earlier. That's a lot of talking. So once again, I'm going to do a simple view. This one is slightly worm view, slightly facing upward, I should say. But not quite as extreme as the last one. And once again, just taking things we picked up, kind of filtering them together. So you can see the nose is slightly above my cheekbones, which would mean we are looking up. If we were looking straight ahead, the nose would probably be slightly even with the cheekbone area, but since we are looking from the bottom up, you'll notice the nose is above those outer edges, above those outermost cheekbone edges. So that kind of helps establish that we are looking up at something. Anyway, I think I've talked about that view enough. So you can see here I'm just kind of making random shapes. This guy has obviously a nonsensical skull. It's kind of giant and crazy up top, and he's got like no lower jaw or very tiny lower jaw. But it's just to go to show you that as long as your skull is kind of functioning in some kind of way that makes a slight amount of sense, even if it's like crazy proportions here and there, crazy forehead, crazy big something or other, as long as those things are kind of functioning, then your face will actually look somewhat like it makes sense. So that's not a person you would ever see, but it kind of looks slightly realistic, despite being completely nonsensical. So I've talked about all that stuff and drawing from different angles, and now this last little sheet of characters and faces is actually going to be about drawing crazy, I don't know, expressions, let's say. So this first expression I'm going to do is kind of crazy, and if you've looked at my liked videos in the recent history and stuff like that, you'll notice that my liked video from, I don't know, from the time I'm posting this video is actually this, I don't know, it makes me laugh. It's this funny video of an Asian girl who's too close to the camera and she's making a weird expression. So I just had to add that into this video. So I'm drawing that here. And if you're wondering what I'm rambling about, you can go look at my liked videos and know what I'm talking about. But it's just kind of this crazy, dumb expression, like staring off into space and having your jaw jutted out forward. But drawing expressions and just kind of really weird expressions too is a good way to kind of accentuate everything you've learned about the skull, because the skull will carry you through like a lot of stuff, eye sockets, all those areas. But where the lips come in, the lips are kind of this crazy area where you can get these lots of emotion, and they can stick out really far, and you can do all kinds of crazy things. And that's where all the kind of muscles in your face can really take shape and do interesting things. So you'll see a lot of these emotion things while the skull kind of area is very intact. You'll see like this one. The lips are kind of where you're having a lot of fun and doing a lot of crazy stuff, because you can get away with that because of how kind of muscular the lip area is. So this guy is jutting his lips outward in a very duck facey type thing. If you've been on Facebook, I'm sure you know what the duck face is. Maybe you have a girlfriend that makes the duck face. But yeah, the duck face, it's classic. And then I wanted to do a simple face that just has an open mouth because I realized I didn't have much of that. So this guy is just screaming, and you can see here, once again, I'm building the top part of the skull in my brain. But the bottom part of the skull is going to be more open. The jaw is going to be coming downward and away from us. So you'll see the top of the teeth, the top of the bottom teeth, and that kind of slightly crescent shape to the jaw. And that is kind of how you build it. So I forgot what I was going to say about it. But you can see this guy's yelling, and he's got some anger. So the eyebrows are kind of pressed in, and they're pointing upward, more inward. I'm trying to say too many things at once. The eyebrows are kind of more inward and pointing outward and upward. And that's kind of that angry feel. So you can see how I did a couple lines there for the like cheek areas and stuff like that. But the basic structure of where the like cheeks are and where the farthest points are is still based on, skeletal stuff. So this is going to be one more face that is a slightly top-down view. Not crazy top-down view, but you can see the mouth is slightly open, so you're getting a slight view of the top of the bottom lip. It's always weird to kind of start describing stuff where you have to use two synonyms together. Not synonyms. Oh man, this is going terribly now. No, where I have to use two antonyms together, like top of the bottom. But that kind of comes in handy when you're drawing all this craziness. So you can see there's a kind of slightly open mouth, slightly agape mouth, and I'm doing the ears here, once again, penning them to the cheekbones, and kind of drawing a cheek, kind of filling out some eye sockety stuff. But you'll notice this guy obviously has a giant head, so clearly he has a giant brain or something. So he's my big-headed guy, and he's got this giant egg head. And I don't know what his story is, but there he's got some brow lines and stuff like that. And this guy is screaming, so I gave him a little rawr thing. And yeah, I drew some circles around this guy's cheek because, why not? Let's just get experimental and crazy with it. But back to reality. Here's a face that's going to be from the side view, and it's just going to be kind of showcasing some different structures of like noses, more flat noses and more kind of tucked in jaws and stuff like that. All this kind of stuff you might want to do if you're just kind of fooling around and making different faces and stuff like that. I think I would say that drawing faces is probably the most gratifying and simple thing you can do with art. You can see how kind of simple these things are, and they're not taking very long, but they're kind of gratifying because you're creating something interesting, and you're kind of doing something that is kind of can turn out either really great or really poor. But when it turns out really great, it's really satisfying for something that's really simple to do. So that's probably why I've done so many faces in the past, just because it's this kind of really simple thing you can do that makes you feel good and it helps you learn, and it's really no like strong involvement or time commitment involved. So that's a lot of fun. So this guy's kind of grumpy. You can see his lower jaw is kind of jutting out just a little bit, and that kind of generates this feeling of kind of stubbornness, I would say, and stuff like that. And you can see once again using the cheekbone as a guide to add a little bit of flare under his eye. There's that cheekbone that just kind of adds personality to the face. Maybe your cheekbone causes some sharpness in your face, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe your face is more rounded, like with some of these other ones. But it's just kind of all the fun of it, knowing when to show off stuff and knowing when not to. So there I drew a little bit of a girl from a top-down view, and once again made it very simple, just focusing on simple lines, and focusing on the top of the head and getting that kind of oval shape and organic lines everywhere and stuff like that, and not worrying about filling out details everywhere. Obviously, if something is small, you don't have to fill out detailed lines everywhere. Just focus on where the shadows are, and once again, drawing like a painter. I'm just gonna keep saying things like that, saying my little catchphrases like drawing like a painter, even though they don't really mean anything otherwise. But hopefully you'll come to understand what I'm talking about when I say those things. So there's another face, very simple male face. He's got kind of a flat nose, but he's, kind of simple. Nothing crazy going on there. But to wrap it up, which I should wrap it up indeed, because this video has been going for a while, I'm just going to draw a nice happy face. And hopefully this video was entertaining and you enjoyed seeing the faces, and you can do some faces on your own and start filling sketchbook pages with faces. And hopefully it makes you happy and you have a good time. I think drawing happy faces is actually one of the more challenging things to do. So I recommend trying it. Try drawing people that are really smiley, because I think it'll help you out. It's challenging, but you'll see if you do it right, it'll just look like a little anime figure with the little up eyes and the smiley face. So all those like anime stuff and things like that, they're all kind of based on these other kind of distinct features of like muscles and things like that. But anyway, I think that's enough rambling, and hopefully you guys will draw some faces and share them with me. And I guess that's about it. So good luck, draw some skulls, and have fun with it.